Hey guys, tonight we're heading deep into the sand-swept wonders of ancient Egypt. But not for the usual highlights. There are no neatly packaged museum tours or well-labeled dioramas here. Instead, you'll be wandering past midnight shadows, through limestone corridors and wind-blown plateaus, brushing against enigmas that still baffle scientists, engineers, and sleep-deprived archaeologists. We'll start with the big one, literally, the pyramids. And not just marvel at them, but seriously ask, how did people over 4,000 years ago build structures that modern cranes would groan under? You're about to walk among massive limestone and granite blocks, stacked so precisely you couldn't slide a credit card between them. And no, you probably wouldn't survive trying to build one yourself. Unless you've got a few thousand unpaid workers, a total disregard for back pain, and a mysterious understanding of the stars. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You start your night at the base of the Great Pyramid of Giza. The moon hangs overhead, casting a cool glow across the stone, making each block gleam faintly like ivory. The ground beneath your feet crunches with wind-blown sand. You run your hand across a slab taller than you, each edge still sharp despite millennia of weather. And then the question creeps in, soft as the breeze. How? Each block of the Great Pyramid weighs on average about 2.5 tons. Some, particularly those used in the King's Chamber, tip the scales at 70 or 80 tons. That's not a typo. And there are over 2 million of these things, all fitted with astonishing accuracy. Mainstream archaeology will tell you levers, sledges, manpower. And yes, to be fair, the Egyptians had a lot of manpower. Tens of thousands of workers, well-fed and decently housed according to recent findings. But even so, the logistics strain belief. Some blocks came from quarries over 500 miles away, over desert without wheels. Your rake and broom modern brain might picture this being done slowly over generations. But estimates suggest the Great Pyramid was built in about 20 years. That's 800 tons of stone moved every single day for 2 decades, without breaks. Even with today's tech, that would require meticulous project management and a disturbingly consistent caffeine supply. But it gets weirder. Some blocks used in the interior chambers are made of granite, not limestone. And not just any granite, Aswan granite. Hard, dense, crystal-rich stone that modern diamond-tipped tools still struggle with. Yet in ancient Egypt, someone shaped and smoothed these monoliths with such precision that they reflect light. The mainstream explanation? Copper tools and sand. Imagine trying to carve a marble countertop using a butter knife and some beach grit, and then imagine it works. Historians still argue whether the builders had access to more advanced techniques, perhaps lost methods involving fire, water expansion, or some clever chemical trick. There's even fringe speculation that sound or vibration played a role, though this mostly lives in the more eccentric corners of YouTube. But while mainstream Egyptology sticks to its chariots, the anomalies pile up. There's no record of how exactly they did this. No instruction manual, no workshop left behind with half-finished pyramid blocks and a note reading, BRB, Inventing Cranes. You walk along the pyramid's base, passing the sloped casing stones, the smooth outer layers that once covered the whole structure. They were cut so finely the joints barely visible. Many were removed over centuries for building mosques, but the ones that remain still shimmer with ancient skill. It's like walking past time itself, layered, stubborn, and silent. There's something serene in that silence. The desert wind, the occasional flutter of a bat overhead, and your own quiet footsteps echoing through eternity. The pyramid doesn't brag. It doesn't explain, it just looms, still standing, still perfect, while empires rise and fall around it like sand dunes. And then, almost as an afterthought, your mind drifts to the why. Why did they build it? Yes, tomb for the pharaoh, stairway to the afterlife, show of divine power. We've all heard that part. But there's no mummy in the Great Pyramid, never was. No burial artifacts either. The sarcophagus in the king's chamber is bare, too small for a grown adult, and utterly unadorned. It's as if the whole thing is a locked room mystery built of stone. Some propose it was a symbolic machine, a sort of resurrection engine aligned with the stars. Others say it served as a calendar, a map of Earth's geophysical constants, even a storage unit for lost knowledge. A few whisper it channeled Earth's magnetic energy. Okay, those last ones come with a generous serving of tinfoil hat. But the point remains. No one agrees. No one knows. You glance upward. The pyramid points directly to the stars. Each side faces true north, south, east, and west with such accuracy it would take modern survey equipment to replicate. And they did this with what? String and eyeballs? You sit on a low step, warm from the sun's earlier kiss, and exhale. There's something deeply comforting about unsolved mysteries. They're reminders that not everything has been tamed, that the world still holds secrets, and sometimes the dustiest ones are the most captivating. So as you lean back against 5,000 years of not knowing, you smile. And then from somewhere beyond the dunes, a distant jackal howls. Just enough to remind you that time moves differently here. And so do answers. You rise, brushing a few stubborn grains of sand off your clothes, and step away from the looming face of the Great Pyramid. Your path curves along the plateau, away from the tourists that will eventually come with cameras and sun hats, though for now, the site is yours alone. Your shadow stretches thin over the limestone and you're heading east toward the Sphinx, but you're not here for the lion body riddle solver. You're looking underground, because beneath your feet, hidden from the desert's glare, lies a chamber that doesn't quite make sense. They call it the Osiris Shaft. You tread carefully as the air cools. Just ahead, a grated opening in the stone marks the top of a vertical shaft, seemingly unimportant until you peer in. There's a ladder, or used to be one. Now it's mostly a hole with secrets. This shaft dives 3 levels deep into the Giza bedrock. Level 1, unremarkable. Level 2, contains a sarcophagus and a strange U-shaped channel that no one's quite explained. Level 3, A sealed chamber submerged in groundwater holding another sarcophagus carved from basalt, a stone so dense it resists basic chisels. And nobody really knows why it's there. No texts mention it. No known pharaoh is buried there. It's not part of the standard tourist narrative, but it exists, patiently ignored by comfortable textbooks. Some claim it's a symbolic tomb of Osiris, the god of the underworld. Others say it's far older than the pyramid above it, built not in Khafra's time but centuries before by hands whose names are long lost to time and sediment. Historians still argue whether the Osiris shaft is even Egyptian in origin. A few bold voices whisper that its depth and construction technique resemble pre-dynastic forms, possibly something inherited from an even earlier civilization, one whose fingerprints are mostly eroded now. But those whispers get you eye rolls in the faculty lounge. What makes the shaft stranger is its verticality. The Egyptians weren't big on vertical tunnels. Most tombs and passageways stretch out horizontally, mirroring the sun's journey across the sky. A deep shaft plunging into the ground feels off script, more like something out of a lost chapter. And yet it's here, silent, wet, possibly sacred, possibly something else. You imagine descending into it, torch in hand, every breath bouncing off limestone and time. What would you find? Bones? Treasure? Just waterlogged stillness? The basalt sarcophagus in the lowest chamber is massive and empty. No inscriptions, no decoration, just a box, sunk in a room no one visits. It's like a locked diary with no writing. As you return to the surface, the sun finally spills across the horizon in burnt orange streaks. The desert is waking. You continue eastward toward another curiosity, the so-called inventory stela. Found near the Sphinx, this stone tablet claims that Khufu, the builder of the Great Pyramid, repaired the Sphinx. It doesn't say he built it. That little discrepancy ruffles feathers. If Khufu only restored the Sphinx, then the Sphinx is older than his reign, possibly much older. Some scholars suggest it may predate the Old Kingdom entirely. How much older? That depends on who you ask, and how quickly you want to get banned from Egyptology conferences. Mainstream thought places the Sphinx's origin in the 4th dynasty, around 2500 BCE. But the water erosion hypothesis says otherwise. Look closely at the Sphinx's enclosure walls. Notice the smooth vertical weathering patterns. That's not wind, that's water. Flowing water, consistent with long-term rainfall. The thing is, the Giza Plateau hasn't seen that kind of rain since around 7000 BCE. Which means the Sphinx could be, deep breath, twice as old as we think. Of course, this theory is controversial. Some argue the erosion is wind-based or exaggerated by salt crystals. Others say the enclosure could have been exposed to runoff during brief wet periods. Historians still argue whether the geological evidence really proves anything, or just gives us something new to fight about. You circle the Sphinx slowly, its face worn soft by time. Whatever expression it once had is half gone now, but there's something regal still hiding in those broken contours. It watches the horizon with a patience you'll never possess. Its body, feline and coiled, seems almost ready to stretch or pounce. And beneath it, more tunnels, some explored, some sealed, some rumored. There are stories, always stories, of chambers beneath the Sphinx. The Hall of Records, some call it, a mythical library said to house ancient wisdom from a civilization before Egypt. There's no concrete evidence, no confirmed chamber, but there are anomalies on ground-penetrating radar, and that's enough to keep the mystery alive. You pause in the Sphinx's shadow, now lengthening westward. The air feels different here, still dry but charged with the weight of ancient curiosity. It's the kind of place that makes even skeptics want to believe in lost worlds and hidden scrolls. And just when your mind starts to drift, your foot catches on something. A small stone, oddly smooth, oddly warm. You stoop and pick it up. Just a pebble maybe, or maybe a clue. That's the thing with Egypt. Every grain of sand might be a secret. Every shadow might be a hallway. And sometimes the biggest riddles are right under the nose of a monument carved to ask one. You slip the stone into your pocket without really knowing why. Maybe it's habit, maybe it's superstition, or maybe after everything you've seen, you're starting to wonder if the ground remembers more than the books do. Now you're heading south, away from Giza's grandeur and into the heart of Middle Egypt. The journey shifts, both in scenery and in mood. Gone are the grand monuments crowned in fame and tourists. Here the landscape softens into undulating desert, lonely hills, and ruins that the world forgot to label properly. Welcome to Abydos. Abydos is old, like seriously old. Older than most dynasties and once considered one of the holiest sites in all of Egypt. And here, nestled quietly in the back of the temple of Seti is one of the strangest, most debated inscriptions in the entire country, possibly the planet. They call it the Abydos helicopter. You squint at the stone relief above one of the lintels. It doesn't immediately register as strange until your eyes adjust and the shapes start to pop. There, just right of center, a series of overlapping carvings that, with an admittedly generous imagination, resemble modern machinery. One looks startlingly like a helicopter, another like a submarine. Others may be tanks or jets, depending on how much coffee you've had. You step back, tilt your head. It's weird. Of course, there are explanations. The mainstream theory, it's a palimpsest. Two overlapping hieroglyphic inscriptions that, due to erosion and the soft sandstone, combined into odd shapes by accident. That's likely, logical, it makes sense. And yet, you can't unsee the little rotors. Historians still argue whether this specific set of hieroglyphs is just an example of poor restoration, or something worth a second look. Fringe theorists leap on it with gusto, calling it evidence of lost technology, ancient visitors, or even time travel. You, standing there, just feel confused. Seti's temple is vast and unusually refined, which adds to the aura. Its limestone walls are carved with delicate precision, and the air inside carries a weight like history humming at a low frequency. This place was meant to endure, to whisper across time. But some of those whispers are garbled. especially in the hallway known as the Hall of the Kings. This corridor, covered in hieroglyphs, contains a chronological list of pharaohs, from the legendary Menes to Seti's own reign. It's neat, ordered, satisfying, until you notice the gaps, names missing, entire lines of rulers simply erased. Some were likely damnatio memoriae, deliberate deletions of disgraced leaders. Others are harder to explain. Historians still argue whether this list reflects true dynastic memory or a rewritten version of history meant to serve political goals. What's weirder? There's a faint echo in the list, a trace of an era not officially recorded. A gap in royal succession that may suggest an earlier reign, something before the first dynasty. Now the theories pile up like sand against a tomb wall. Some speak of a pre-dynastic golden age, ruled by the Shemsu Hor, or followers of Horus. Semi-mythical figures said to have reigned long before Menes unified Egypt. We're talking 10,000 BCE territory. That's not a typo. Mainstream historians dismiss it. Too speculative, too convenient. And yet the term Shemsu Hor appears in temple texts. It's not pulled from the air. Whether they were demigods, kings, or metaphors for celestial bodies, no one really agrees. But they're there, hiding between the carved lines of accepted history. You run your fingers across the stone, trying to trace what time has eroded. The ancient Egyptians believed in cycles, golden ages followed by chaos, then rebirth. Perhaps they weren't just talking cosmology. Maybe they remembered something older than themselves. Your feet carry you deeper into the temple through side chambers whose purpose no longer has a name. You pass carvings of gods with animal heads, humans with waz scepters, and boats sailing not across water, but through stars. Abydos was more than a city. It was a gate, a spiritual portal between the world of the living and the land of the dead. The Osirion, a mysterious subterranean structure behind the temple, reinforces that belief. It's unlike anything else in Egypt. Massive granite blocks, strange water channels, and a floor level lower than the Nile's. The Osirion looks like it was built for giants. The blocks are too large, too precise, and far too early for its supposed date. Egyptologists list it as New Kingdom, but the style resembles the megalithic construction of much earlier periods, almost like a relic from another time repurposed by Seti to honor Osiris. You stand by its edge, peering into the still water pooled at the bottom. Your reflection stares back, wavering. Something about this place feels untouched, untouchable. Even mainstream scholars admit the Osirion is a mystery. No tomb, no official purpose, just a whisper of something lost. A ritual space, a temple to death, or a place for remembering something the rest of the world was made to forget. The silence here is thicker. You imagine torches flickering in niches long burned out. The air tastes older than dust. You back away slowly, your thoughts chasing each other down endless corridors. And just when you think the day can't get any stranger, someone behind you murmurs about the star maps. You pivot. A guide, maybe. A local researcher. He's pointing upward at a ceiling you hadn't noticed, one painted with stars, planets, and something suspiciously like a supernova. You squint. There's Sirius, Orion's belt, perfectly aligned. Their positions suggest the Egyptians didn't just study the sky. They knew how it moved. Ancient Egyptian temples weren't just buildings. They were aligned with celestial events, like the heliacal rising of Sirius, which signaled the Nile's flood. But the precision, the accuracy of these star charts, thousands of years before telescopes. Historians still argue whether Egyptian astronomy was observational or inherited from earlier sources. You don't need a telescope to feel small here, just a ceiling, just a question no one can quite answer. The day ends with you standing in the middle of history's blind spot, half seen, half felt, and somehow more real because of it. The stars linger in your mind long after you leave Abydos behind. Even in the noonday heat, you can still picture them, carefully painted arcs of ancient sky, more precise than they had any right to be. You're not an astronomer, but you don't need to be one to feel it. They were watching something, tracking something, maybe predicting things we're still trying to understand. The road south takes you toward Dendera, and you're not sure you're ready for what's next. Because while Abydos whispered, Dendera shouts. It's here in the Temple of Hathor that Egypt delivers one of its most controversial, crowd-dividing, conspiracy-loving mysteries. The Dendera Light. You step beneath the stone archways of the temple, still vibrant with blue and ochre ceiling art, and descend into a crypt carved beneath the main floor. The air cools, dry and oddly sweet, like incense left too long in the sun. And there, etched into the walls, it waits. Stone-carved scenes of curious shapes that, depending on whom you ask, are either sacred lotus bulbs or ancient electrical devices. The light bulbs, as they're often called, are oval-shaped objects, each cradled in the arms of serpent-like figures, emitting what could be mistaken for light rays. They're tethered to what looks like a cable or stem, and they rest atop what could be a socket, or just a stylized pillar. To the trained eye of an electrical engineer, it looks shockingly, pun intended, like a Crookes tube, a primitive cathode ray device. To Egyptologists, it's just a ceremonial depiction of creation and myth. Symbolism, not science. Still, you crouch there staring, and you can't help but wonder, why so much detail, so much care for a scene that officially means nothing more than spiritual birth? Historians still argue whether these reliefs are symbolic metaphors or veiled depictions of lost technology. Most lean toward metaphor, but they can't fully explain the specificity of the shapes, the coiled cord, the positioning. Fringe theorists have a field day here. Some say it's proof of ancient electrical knowledge, evidence that the ancient Egyptians used some form of lighting in tombs or temples. Because here's the twist. No soot has ever been found on the ceilings of the deepest tombs. No torch residue, no smoke marks. How did they see? Some scholars suggest mirrors, reflective surfaces bouncing sunlight down corridors. That's plausible. But try bouncing sunlight into a room with 5 right-angle turns and no natural openings. Go ahead, we'll wait. So you sit there in the quiet, cool dark of the crypt and ask yourself the question that echoes louder than any torch could have burned. What if they knew something we didn't? Eventually, you climb out of the crypt and into the light of the Hathor courtyard. Dendera is sprawling, with winding chambers and rooftop views that let you see miles of the Nile's curve. But even here, among well-documented ruins and clearly marked artifacts, you get the sense that there's a second Egypt hiding just beneath the surface. An Egypt made not of myths or facts, but of questions that refuse to die. Take, for example, the Dendera Zodiac. Inside a nearby chamber, you find a replica of a circular stone ceiling once housed here. The original now lives in the Louvre. At first glance, it's just an ornate star map, but look closer and the strangeness piles up. It's a full spherical depiction of the heavens. Planets, constellations, zodiac signs, not just as decorative motifs, but as part of a functional astronomical diagram. It even depicts a solar eclipse. The thing is, spherical astronomy was supposedly not developed until the Greeks. And the Greeks didn't arrive in Egypt until much later. So how did this zodiac, dated to the late Ptolemaic period, show knowledge that supposedly didn't exist yet? Historians still argue whether the zodiac was designed by Egyptian priests, Greek astronomers working in Egypt, or some hybrid school of thought, blending both. The lines blur, literally and figuratively, but you know this much. Someone was watching the stars. Someone knew their cycles with a depth and clarity that feels unnerving, especially for a civilization that supposedly didn't use telescopes. Maybe they didn't need to. The Egyptians had a knack for aligning their temples with celestial events. The rising of Sirius, the solstices, the equinoxes. It wasn't superstition. It was planning. Dendera is no exception. Light hits certain parts of the temple only on specific dates. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe it's another layer of meaning, one we've only just begun to decode. You lean against a column carved with images of Hathor, goddess of love, music, fertility. Her face, serene and round, smiles from every direction. It's comforting, oddly maternal, but even she seems to know something you don't. As you walk through the temple, you find side rooms filled with medical instruments, scalpels, tweezers, forceps, some of them disturbingly advanced. This was once a center of healing, of temple medicine. Not crude guesswork, but procedures and protocols passed down across centuries. Ancient Egyptian doctors could diagnose over 200 diseases, perform dentistry, and stitch wounds with astonishing precision. Some scrolls even mention brain surgery, not figuratively, literally. Trepanation marks found on skulls with signs of healing. They opened skulls, and some patients lived. You look down at your hands, you with your internet, your apps, your GPS that still gets confused in parking garages. They had papyrus bronze, and somehow they knew. In another hall, you find the names of ancient medical practitioners etched into stone. Men and women, yes, women who performed surgeries and led healing rituals. The balance of science and spirit, nerve and nerve endings. The temples weren't just sacred spaces. They were early hospitals, universities, observatories, laboratories, and confessionals. You step out into the sun again, blinking. The light stings, but it's honest. Unlike the crypts, which offer truths wrapped in riddles. You breathe in, Dendera has left its mark. You feel it like a faint vibration in your ribs, a sense that something is still humming down there just below conscious thought. There are more mysteries ahead, but first a break, a sip of water, a glance back at Hathor's temple, her columns painted blue with stars. And you wonder, what else have we painted over, buried or filed under myth? You don't get very far before the heat begins to play tricks on your mind. Or maybe it's the history whispering again, curling around the edges of your thoughts like desert wind through a broken window. You're headed deeper into the desert now, farther from the lush banks of the Nile and closer to a place that feels more rumor than real. The Serapeum of Saqqara. The sun beats down like judgment as you climb a dusty incline. There's little around, just scattered stones and the occasional lizard darting between shadows. But then you see it, a rectangular opening carved into the ground. Not much to look at, just a pit really. Until you descend. The air drops in temperature instantly. It's a welcome chill, like stepping into the breath of something ancient. The steps are steep and the silence is absolute, except for the sound of your shoes scuffing the limestone. And then you're there, underground, in the darkness. The Serapeum doesn't ease you in, it slams you with awe. Enormous granite sarcophagi, each the size of a small bus, sit recessed into niches along the tunnel. They're massive, impossibly so. Each weighs an estimated 70 tons, with lids that alone clock in at 30. Their surfaces are perfectly smooth, edges squared with precision that feels uncomfortably modern. And here's the kicker, no hieroglyphs. No inscriptions, just polished, dark stone, ominous, silent. Historians agree these sarcophagi once held sacred apis bulls, animals worshipped as living gods. Their burial was a major religious rite, and the Serapeum supposedly was a subterranean temple to honor them. That's the official story, but the deeper you go, the stranger it gets, because let's ask the obvious. How did they move these things? Even with today's technology, maneuvering a 70-ton granite box through a narrow underground passage would require serious equipment, cranes, hydraulics, headache medicine. The ancient Egyptians had none of those. Or so we're told. Yet here the boxes sit, perfectly positioned, perfectly placed, like it was no big deal. Some say they dragged them, inch by agonizing inch. Others suggest rolling them on lubricated logs. One especially optimistic theory involves sand and controlled collapse. That's cute. But you stare at the tunnel walls, tight, uneven, claustrophobic, and you think, really? Historians still argue whether the Serapeum boxes were created entirely during the dynastic period, or if they predate even that. A growing fringe theory suggests these might be leftovers from a lost civilization or an era of Egyptian history we simply haven't found yet. There's no definitive proof. Just doubt. And then there's the craftsmanship. The interiors of the boxes are hollowed with such symmetry, such smoothness that engineers visiting the site today still gape. No chisel marks, no tool chatter, just glossy, silent perfection. And unlike the pyramids, these boxes aren't visible monuments to power. They're buried, hidden, not meant to be admired, only used. or sealed. You step closer to one and place your hand on the cool granite. It hums. Not audibly, not literally, but something vibrates. The kind of feeling you get in a concert hall before the music starts, or in a thunderstorm before the lightning strikes. They say the Apis bulls were chosen based on specific markings, sacred symbols on their hides, shaped just so. When one died, a new calf with identical markings had to be found. That's rare, spookily rare, statistically odd. So the bulls are odd, the boxes are odder, and the whole thing makes you feel like you're standing inside someone else's thought process. A blueprint for beliefs you don't share but can't help but respect. And what if, just what if, the bulls were just the excuse? What if the boxes were older than the bulls, repurposed, like buying an ancient house and redecorating it with your posters? You continue down the corridor. More sarcophagi loom ahead. Some lids are ajar. Most aren't. None contain bulls anymore, just thick, musty air and theories. The farther you go, the more your brain starts assembling possibilities. Maybe the boxes weren't meant for animals at all. Maybe they were some kind of energy chamber, sound resonance chamber, even storage for something not quite living. You don't know. Nobody does. And that's the terrifying part. You round a corner and find yourself face to face with a box partially cracked open. A beam of light from your lantern glints off its edge. You peek inside, expecting what exactly? Bones, gold, a neon sign that says surprise? There's nothing. Just stone. Smooth, empty, silent stone. Still, it feels like something's watching. You retreat slowly, shoes scraping against dust. Above you, the world continues, goats bleating, vendors calling out prices, children laughing in courtyards, but down here the world has stopped, frozen in granite. You ascend the steps, blinking against the sunlight, and re-enter the realm of the living. You're relieved and strangely disappointed. You sit on a low stone and sip from your water bottle, now warm. The desert wind tousles your hair and you can almost hear the bulls, long gone, their hooves pounding the earth, their breath steaming in morning light, their bodies lowered into stone boxes with reverence. Or not, because maybe none of that happened. Maybe everything you've heard is wrong. Maybe the Serapeum isn't a tomb, it's a question. Not what it holds, but why it exists. You stand and dust yourself off. There are more ruins to see, more theories to half believe. But you'll carry this one with you. Like a secret you didn't mean to learn, you leave the Serapeum behind, but it doesn't quite leave you. That weight, granite or mystery or both, clings to your mind as you trudge onward through sand and time. The Nile glimmers in the distance, steady as ever. But your next destination leads away from water and toward whispers. The bent pyramid of Dashur. It rises like a half-remembered idea, not quite finished, not quite wrong, but definitely strange. Most pyramids climb with confidence, crisp lines narrowing skyward. But this one starts at a steep angle, then halfway up. It changes its mind. It bends, as if catching itself mid-fall. A construction hiccup, maybe. A deliberate design. No one really agrees. You approach its limestone flanks, still partially clad in their original casing stones, smooth as frozen cream. The desert sun glints off the surface, making the whole structure shimmer slightly, as if it's breathing. The base is steep, aggressively so. Then about a third of the way up, the angle softens, easing toward the summit like an apology. It's not subtle. It's architectural whiplash. Mainstream historians say this was a structural adjustment, that during construction, the steep angle began to cause instability, so the builders modified the design midway to avoid collapse. Logical, sensible, boring. But then comes the fringe. Some theorists claim the angle change was intentional from the start, meant to reflect celestial harmonics or mimic the curve of the Earth. Others whisper it had something to do with internal chambers, pressure balancing, or even resonance frequencies, because of course it does. Historians still argue whether the bend was a mistake turned masterpiece or a code embedded in stone. You squint up at it and wonder, would any modern architect let that kind of mistake stand? Or would they raise and restart? But this pyramid remains. Crooked, confident, mysterious. You circle around its perimeter and the oddity deepens. There are two entrances, one on the north face, another on the west. Most pyramids have just one. Why two? Why on opposing sides? You crouch by the lower entrance, staring into the long, sloping passage that disappears into shadow. It's narrow, claustrophobically so, and steep. You imagine crawling in, your shoulders scraping the stone, the air getting thinner, and regret swelling in your chest. You don't go in, not today. You're here to observe, not get wedged into history's tight spaces. Besides, the desert's heat is enough to make a tunnel seem like a sarcophagus waiting to happen. Instead, you press your hand to the outer wall. The limestone is hot but smooth, beautifully carved. The blocks fit so tightly you can't slip a coin between them. No mortar. Just impossible precision, like the Serapeum boxes, but on a much grander scale. And this thing isn't small. It's massive, 344 feet tall, nearly matching the Great Pyramid at Giza. So even if it's flawed, it's still overwhelming. That's Egyptian engineering for you. When they go weird, they go big, and it gets weirder. The internal layout of the bent pyramid is unlike any other. Twin chambers stacked vertically, side passages, hidden nooks. Scholars have mapped it, measured it, dissected it with ground-penetrating radar, and it still doesn't make much sense. Why this complexity? Why the redundancy? Some believe it was meant to serve as a model, a prototype, a rough draft for future pyramids. Others suggest it had religious significance, perhaps tied to the duality of life and death, sun and shadow, steepness and softness. Symbolism, like everything else here, layered thick. A few fringe theorists say the shift in angle creates an internal resonance effect. That sounds or energy flows in specific ways within the pyramid, amplified by its structure. They point to measurements taken by sound engineers who claim unusual acoustic phenomena inside. Nothing conclusive, of course. But it's the kind of speculation that makes you lean in just a little. You walk a bit farther and find yourself facing a small, ruined temple adjacent to the pyramid. Mostly rubble now. A few columns, a shattered lintel. But once this was the ceremonial heart of the complex, the place where priests may have conducted rituals or offerings were made, or perhaps where the architect sat in shame or triumph, depending on who you ask. You sit on a nearby stone block, catching your breath. The wind kicks up dust and the pyramid looms beside you, half awkward, half majestic. You wonder if Sneferu, the pharaoh who commissioned it, was proud or annoyed when he saw the final result. Here's a fun twist. Sneferu didn't stop at this one. Right after the bent pyramid, he ordered another one, the red pyramid, built just a few miles north. That one? Perfect angles, smooth sides, no sudden changes. It's almost as if the bent pyramid was practice, or maybe insurance. Some scholars theorize that Sneferu wanted to guarantee his ascent to the afterlife, so he built 2 burial sites just in case one failed. Talk about hedging your bets in the afterlife real estate market. Others think the second pyramid was necessary because the bent one wasn't structurally sound enough for eternal residence. Either way, it's rare for a pharaoh to have 2 pyramids. Extra credit, maybe. You stand again, stretching your legs. A jackal watches from a distance, half curious, half bored. The pyramid casts a strange, slanted shadow over the sand, like a triangle drawn by a child with shaky hands. Still it holds. Still it endures. And still no one knows quite why it bends. As you walk away, the silhouette of the bent pyramid lingers in your peripheral vision. It feels like a wink from history, a sly, silent joke written in stone. Maybe it's a mistake, maybe it's a message, maybe like so many Egyptian things, it's both. The wind picks up, pushing you along the edge of Dashur's vast sands as you leave the bent pyramid behind. Its warped silhouette fades into the morning haze, and up ahead looms another riddle. The red pyramid. Unlike its awkward sibling, this one stands tall and even, as if daring the world to question its perfection. You trudge closer. The reddish limestone blocks give it its name, though centuries of sun and sand have dulled the color to something more like warm clay. Still, it's imposing. At nearly 344 feet tall, with an angle just shy of 43 degrees, it rises in clean, straight lines, a geometric sigh of relief after the angular midlife crisis of the bent pyramid. And yet, despite its symmetry, the red pyramid holds its own secrets. You pause before the entrance. It's high up, about 90 feet off the ground. Originally, there was a staircase or ramp, now long gone, so a modern metal stair leads the way. It creaks under your weight as you climb. At the top, a narrow passage yawns open. You crouch, enter, and descend slowly. The tunnel angles downward at a steep 27 degrees for over 200 feet. The air grows thick and sour. The walls sweat with mineral damp. Your knees ache. And then, Chamber 1, a tall, corbelled vault with a pointed ceiling that rises like a stone tent above you. No decorations, no hieroglyphs, just rough, quiet stone stretching upward into the gloom. The second chamber is similar, and then finally a third, a burial chamber, also bare. No sarcophagus has been found inside. No treasures, just empty, echoing space. It feels like stepping into the lungs of a forgotten god. Historians still argue whether Sneferu was actually buried here or whether the pyramid was symbolic, a backup after bent pyramid mishaps, or a monumental flex from a pharaoh obsessed with legacy. You lean against a wall, catching your breath. The silence is different in here, denser. You clap your hands once and listen to the echo ricochet around like a ghost playing tag. And here's the strange part. Acoustically, these chambers behave in weird ways. Some researchers say certain frequencies resonate unusually well inside the pyramid, bouncing in patterns not fully understood. Was it intentional? Were these structures designed not just for eternity, but for sound? The idea sounds fringe, sure, but fringe doesn't mean foolish, not in Egypt. Outside again, the sun hits you like a forged door swung open. You squint at the smooth angles of the red pyramid. It's beautiful, mathematically precise, a monument to geometry itself, but also a bit dull. No bizarre bends, no sudden turns, a model student. And maybe that's the real mystery. Why make this one so normal after the architectural drama of the bent pyramid? Was Sneferu overcompensating, playing it safe? Or what if the first pyramid served some hidden function the second didn't need? Some theorists speculate the bent pyramid was a spiritual tool, some kind of energy device or resonance chamber, and the red pyramid was the tomb. Others flip the theory entirely, claiming the red pyramid was the ceremonial decoy, and Sneferu was secretly entombed elsewhere. You can almost hear a Dan Brown novel writing itself. Either way, no confirmed body has ever been found in either pyramid, just empty halls and stone air. You start to suspect that was the point, not burial, but bafflement. As you wander back toward your guide's tent, you notice something odd about the ground. A single line of ancient paving stones juts out from the base of the pyramid, leading nowhere. It vanishes beneath the sand after a few yards, like a path that forgot its destination. Some believe these pathways were symbolic. Others say they once connected to lost temples long since crumbled to dust. One theory even suggests they align with celestial bodies, stars that guided the soul beyond. You trail your fingers across the worn stone. It feels cool despite the heat. Stillness anchored in time. Later, sitting by a fire, you think about Sneferu, a man with not one but 3 pyramids credited to his name, the bent, the red, and possibly the Medum pyramid further south. A trilogy of ambition, or confusion, or experimentation. Here's a fun tidbit. The Medum pyramid collapsed. Or maybe it was never finished. No one can say for sure. Its sides are missing, its interior exposed like a dissected lung. It's both ruin and diagram, perfect for scholars, terrible for souls. So Sneferu, father of Khufu, who would later build the Great Pyramid, was the original overachiever. A man who may have invented the true pyramid form, who stumbled, corrected, and built again. And in doing so, he laid the groundwork for monuments that still defy logic today. You poke the fire with a stick. The embers glow like tiny suns. Above, the stars emerge scattered and eternal. You think of the pyramids pointing skyward like stone arrows aimed at something we still haven't quite understood. You wonder, did Sneferu know that millennia later strangers would stand before his creations and scratch their heads? Did he plan for mystery? Or did mystery just follow him around like a well-trained jackal? Either way, his legacy holds firm, set in limestone and sand. 3 pyramids, countless questions, not a bad afterlife. You lie back, staring at the stars. Orion shimmers above, same stars, different questions, always. Morning arrives with a strange silence, thicker than before, like the air is holding its breath. You sit up, stretch, and feel the ache in your joints from sleeping on sand. But today you head not toward a pyramid, but to a flat, windswept stretch of the desert that seems featureless. Until it doesn't. There it is, rising like an accidental hill, the Serapeum of Saqqara. You wouldn't guess at first glance that beneath this unassuming spot lies one of Egypt's most mind-bending mysteries. But the entrance, a sloping corridor carved into bedrock, gives it away. You descend slowly, each step echoing. The air cools, and then, like the opening of a magician's trick, the hall widens, revealing a vast subterranean gallery. Lined up neatly like sleeping giants are 24 massive granite sarcophagi. Each one weighs over 70 tons. The lids alone, about 30 tons each. Their surfaces are smooth, almost impossibly polished, and the interiors are hollowed out with precision that makes modern engineers wince. You walk slowly past the first box. It towers above you, black, silent, and still bearing chisel marks so fine they catch the light. This isn't just craftsmanship, it's obsession. Now here's the strange part. These boxes are thought to have housed the sacred Apis bulls, animals worshipped as manifestations of the god Ptah. When a bull died, it was embalmed, honored, and laid to rest here, supposedly in these boxes, but no bull mummies have been found inside most of them. Some were empty when discovered. Some contained bits and pieces, yes, but nothing definitive. And no one to this day can say with certainty how the ancient Egyptians carved, transported, and lowered these mega coffins into underground chambers, so tight you have to turn sideways to pass. Historians still argue whether these sarcophagi were meant for bulls at all, or if that was just a convenient theory pinned to an inconvenient mystery. You rest your hand against one box. It's cold. You can see your reflection faintly in the polished granite. Bizarre for something chiseled thousands of years ago without diamond-tipped tools. The fit of the lids is so precise that air can barely pass between the edges. That's not just functional, it's poetic. Fringe theories, of course, abound. Some say these boxes were energy storage devices. Others whisper about alien tech. You chuckle, but then look at the perfectly square inner corners of the box again, and suddenly, it's harder to laugh. Even if the boxes were for bulls, why go to this extreme? Why 70-ton coffins when wood would have sufficed? Why the mirror finishes? The impossible geometry, the subterranean secrecy. You think about the effort required. Quarries had to be located, stones cut and shaped with copper tools and sand, supposedly, then transported across miles of desert, then hauled down a narrow descending tunnel without the use of pulleys, cranes, or forklifts. It's enough to make your head hurt. And let's not forget the Serapeum isn't just a curiosity. It's part of a larger religious site. Saqqara, the ancient necropolis, is a sprawling mess of tombs, temples, and oddities. Nearby stands the step pyramid of Djoser, the oldest pyramid in Egypt. Built centuries before the Giza pyramids, It marks the beginning of monumental stone architecture. So in a way, this place, Saqqara, is the alpha and the omega of Egyptian burial traditions. Where it began. And where the questions pile up like limestone blocks. You wander the galleries, counting the sarcophagi. All of them huge, all of them mysterious. Some have carvings, but many are smooth, unadorned. That too feels deliberate, like the mystery was meant to be preserved, not explained. Suddenly, your guide's voice echoes through the chamber. He mentions a name, Auguste Mariette, a 19th century French archaeologist who stumbled upon the Serapeum in 1851 after following the trail of Greco-Roman texts. He dug until he found the entrance, crawled through sand-filled tunnels, and emerged into this chamber. Dumbfounded, probably. The mystery hasn't faded since. You sit down on a stone ledge, legs swinging, and try to imagine the moment that first lid was lifted. What did they expect to find? A bull, a body, a curse? Some say they found a sarcophagus so tightly sealed they feared opening it might release ancient gases or worse, ancient bacteria. Scientists debated, stalled, then opened it anyway. Nothing deadly emerged. Unless you count existential dread, you look again at the boxes. They don't seem made for anything mortal. They seem designed to intimidate, to outlast erosion, time, and curiosity, which they've done rather successfully. At the far end of the chamber, someone points out a broken lid. It's been cracked clean down the middle. Was it damaged in ancient times during excavation? Or was someone or something trying to get in or out? You shiver. The cold of the chamber finally sinks into your skin. There's a theory that these boxes were created by a lost civilization older than the Egyptians themselves. A group with unknown tools, knowledge, and purpose. The Egyptians, in this view, simply inherited the Serapeum, repurposing what they didn't understand. Like kids moving into an abandoned spaceship and calling it a clubhouse. Is that true? Probably not. But then again, you're standing in a room full of stone coffins heavier than tanks, carved with laser-level accuracy, built before even Archimedes was a twinkle in the Mediterranean's eye. You climb slowly back up the entry shaft. The desert greets you like an oven left on. Light floods your eyes. Above ground again, the Serapeum feels unreal, like a fever dream beneath the sands. You sip some water and stare back at the low hill that conceals so much precision. It's funny how much mystery can fit into something so quiet. You dust your hands, take one last look, and walk away. Still no closer to an answer. The sun overhead is unrelenting, but your mind is already drifting toward cooler shadows. The kind hidden in hieroglyphs, in underground chambers, in silence. You're heading now to Abydos. Not just any temple, not just any stretch of desert. It's the burial site of Osiris himself, or so the ancients believed. Which is saying something, since Osiris is the god of the dead, and gods don't usually die. Your sandals crunch along the dry earth as the temple of Seti rises in front of you. It's oddly elegant for such a power-charged place. Graceful columns, clean carvings, faint traces of pigment clinging to the walls like dreams refusing to fade. The temple feels alive, humming softly, not with electricity, of course, but with meaning. Centuries stacked like invisible bricks in the air. You step into the hypostyle hall. Shadows stretch tall across stone. Here's something strange. A Among the usual divine processions and cartouches, there's one carving that doesn't quite fit. Your guide gestures upward where a section of ceiling features an odd grouping of symbols. To your surprise, you recognize some of them. Is that a helicopter? You blink. No, it's probably just layers of overlapping carvings, worn and weathered. Maybe two names etched over each other, eroded by time. But still, the shape is there. A bubble cockpit, rotor blades. There's even something that looks like a tank, a submarine, and a futuristic jet. Historians still argue whether this infamous Abydos helicopter is a misinterpreted palimpsest or an actual record of something else. Something impossible. Fringe theorists leap on it, of course. Proof of ancient flight, they say. Aliens, others whisper. But maybe the wildest part is how well it fuels the imagination. You crane your neck, trying to unsee the shapes, but once they're there, they're hard to ignore. It's not just one form, it's the collection, like a glyphic museum of modern warfare carved thousands of years too early. You take a few steps further. The hall darkens. There's something sacred in this dimness, like you're being swallowed gently by the past. Torches used to light these walls. Priests used to chant here. You feel them, not in the spooky sense, but in the weight of attention, the way people once believed in this place. Further in lies the Osirion. It's lower, deeper, and built in a style that doesn't match the rest of the temple. Massive granite blocks form a rectangular chamber sunken below ground level, accessed by a walkway that now floods seasonally. Water seeps in through the floor, leaving a reflective sheen across the stones. The effect is eerie and beautiful, like walking on a mirror. And here's the kicker. The Osirian's architecture is completely different from the rest of Seti's temple. It feels older, cruder in style, but more monumental in scale. Some suggest it predates the temple above, possibly by centuries. Others think Seti built it in imitation of some earlier style. But why would a pharaoh build a shrine beneath his own temple and make it look so ancient? Historians still argue whether the Osirian is a deliberate archasing monument or a remnant of a lost chapter in Egyptian history. Some claim it's the true tomb of Osiris, a symbolic portal to the underworld. Others suggest it had a ritualistic function tied to water, death, and rebirth. You crouch near the base of one of the granite pillars. The stones are massive, comparable to those at Baalbek in Lebanon. Each block weighs dozens of tons. And again, the question nags, how did they move these? Lower them here, without cranes, pulleys, or alien anti-gravity beams. There's no inscription here, no dedicatory text. No grand relief to tell the story, just silence and scale. That in itself feels intentional. You lean back, take in the chamber. Water laps gently at the base of a block. Somewhere above, tourists might be chatting. But here there's only the sound of dripping water and your own heartbeat. The Osirian doesn't want to explain itself. You rise and head back up. A gust of wind kicks up dust as you emerge. The contrast between sun-blasted desert and that cold, shadowed sanctuary below is dizzying. Like stepping between worlds. You blink, trying to recalibrate. Outside, a camel bellows, a reminder that you're in the present. But your mind? It's still chewing on that ceiling carving, still wondering about those megastones, still unsettled by the way that underground chamber didn't match its own temple, like a whisper of something else, something unspoken. Back at the temple entrance, you spot a cluster of partially buried blocks, unfinished carvings, broken cartouches. You run your fingers across one. It's been 3,000 years since someone first did the same. But it still holds warmth from the sun, still feels like a message. A half sentence mid-thought. The mysteries of Abydos are not loud. They don't announce themselves with golden masks or hidden chambers. They lie in architectural whispers, in mismatched styles, in strange symbols left without footnotes. It's the kind of mystery that doesn't ask for an answer. It asks for attention. You take one last look over your shoulder before leaving the site. The shadows inside the temple seem to ripple slightly, as if winking. You don't wink back, but you do smile. The next stretch of desert road is long, sun-pounded, and humming with the kind of stillness only Egypt can deliver. You ride it like a warm lullaby, letting the wind play with your robes, watching mirages blur the horizon like the edge of a memory. By the time you arrive at the next enigma, your mind is already somewhere between curiosity and surrender. This one lives in stone, but not just any stone. Deep in the hills near Aswan, a single colossal object lies half-carved in its quarry bed, unmoved, unfinished, and entirely unmatched in scale, the unfinished obelisk. You've seen obelisks before, tall, slender monuments etched with triumph and divine favor, but nothing quite like this. This thing is a monster. You approach it slowly. It's still attached to the bedrock, as if someone began pulling it out of the earth and just, stopped. The obelisk would have stood nearly 140 feet tall if completed. Weighing more than 1,000 tons, that's the weight of about 200 elephants, give or take one particularly moody one. You slide your hand along its smooth, sun-warmed surface. It's not rough or jagged like a project abandoned mid-chisel. No, it's elegant, precise. The ancient masons were in the final stages of shaping when they hit a fatal flaw, a crack spidering through the base. That crack ended the dream. The obelisk would never rise, but here's the part that melts your brain a little. Even today, with all our cranes, hydraulics, and engineering wizardry, we would struggle badly to move this thing, let alone transport it hundreds of miles and erect it vertically. And yet, the ancient Egyptians planned to do just that, using nothing more than ropes, ramps, grit, and apparently divine-level stubbornness. Historians still argue whether the techniques involved ramps coated with clay, sledges lubricated with water, or massive teams of oxen guided by priests with sacred chants. There's no instruction manual, just this one attempt, frozen in time. You walk the length of the obelisk. It takes longer than expected. It's absurdly big. More like a ship than a monument, and in some ways it was. A ship of meaning. Obelisks weren't just stone needles, they were sunbeams in stone form, meant to honor the sun god Ra, piercing the sky, anchoring divinity to earth. They were messages, lighthouses, prayers, and yet here lies one silent, horizontal, cracked. You squat by the crack. It's jagged but not chaotic. You imagine the moment the workers noticed it. The long pause, the disbelieving stares, the shrugging. Did they weep? Did they curse? Did they walk away in silence or scratch their heads for weeks? hoping the gods might suggest some cosmic epoxy. You trace a few tool marks along the walls of the trench surrounding the obelisk. They're rhythmic, deliberate, copper chisels most likely. Repeated again and again until the stone gave way. Hundreds of workers, thousands of hours, all for nothing. Or maybe not for nothing. The unfinished obelisk has become a kind of relic in its own right. A monument to ambition, a love letter to failure. Because even in its brokenness, it tells a story of skill, of scale, of sacred obsession. You step back to take it all in again. It dwarfs you, dwarfs everything. The sky seems smaller with it here. Like you're not looking at a fallen monument, but an idea that got halfway to becoming divine. And here's the thing. This isn't even unique. Other sites, other quarries show signs of grand attempts that ended in abandonment. The ancients dreamed large, and sometimes the earth said no. Some fringe theorists argue that this obelisk wasn't meant for humans at all. That its size implies lost technology, or that it was shaped with tools far beyond copper and sweat. Laser precision, they mutter. Ancient machines. Others go further. Maybe the obelisk was meant to never rise. Maybe it was always symbolic. But more grounded historians push back. We just don't give ancient laborers enough credit, they argue. And perhaps they're right. The Egyptian state was nothing if not organized, capable of mobilizing resources, feeding armies of workers, and coordinating building projects that still boggle modern minds. You glance back once more as you leave the quarry. The obelisk lies unmoving, like a sleeping god. And just for a moment, you swear you hear the echo of a chisel. Tap, tap, tap. Except it's just the wind. You let it carry you toward the river where more mysteries wait. You remember a phrase someone once told you. Egypt is less a country and more a mood. And now you know why. It's not just the temples, the tombs, the sand. It's the unfinishedness of it all. The sense that no matter how much we know, there's always one more layer buried underneath. One more monument waiting to rise or fall. You drift along the riverbank, feet dragging through warm sand as you eye the horizon for the next unsolved whisper from antiquity, and soon you see it, or rather you see what's not there. A missing crown, a sacred jewel misplaced by time because what you're approaching is a temple. That isn't really a temple, at least not anymore. The temple of Setioi at Abydos looms ahead, half sunken in dust, worn smooth in places like a river stone. But tonight, your path doesn't take you to its grand pillars or shadowed halls. No, you're headed behind it, into the quiet corridor of a relief panel so oddly carved that for decades it sent imaginations into orbit. You arrive just as the golden hour kisses the sandstone walls. And there it is, the helicopter. Well, not really, but from a distance, and especially in old photographs, it does look like that. Alongside it, a strange, bulbous shape some swear resembles a submarine. Another, like a futuristic aircraft or hovercraft. You squint. You tilt your head. You try to be rational, but your brain can't unsee it. That sure looks like a flying machine. This is the so-called Abydos helicopter panel, and it's the ancient mystery equivalent of a Rorschach test. Depending on whom you ask, it's either a weird quirk of carving technique or evidence that the Egyptians had flying technology thousands of years ago. You know, totally normal options. Historians still argue whether the panel is the result of palimpsest carving, a reused surface where one set of hieroglyphs was later overwritten by another, creating a kind of stone typo. The overlapping signs, smoothed by erosion, then accidentally took on these modern-looking shapes. But conspiracy theorists? Oh, they love this one. They say it's proof that the ancients were visited, that knowledge from beyond gave Egypt its golden leap forward. Pyramids, obelisks, power tools. Check, check, check. Maybe the gods weren't gods at all, but beings with aircraft. You step closer. The panel is smaller than you expected. Just a few carved symbols stacked and partial. The detail is real, but the illusion maybe is projection. Still, it's hard not to feel a tiny chill when your fingers hover over a helicopter etched thousands of years before such machines existed. Maybe it's a coincidence. Maybe it's imagination. Or maybe it's both. The truth is, your mind loves patterns. It loves stories, and the Egyptians, oh, they knew that. Their entire civilization is a myth-making machine. Part memory, part miracle, part mischief. You move on, winding deeper into Abydos. The temple complex itself is older than most cities. Seti I commissioned it, but some of the foundations may predate even him. That's the thing with Egypt. Just when you think you've found the origin, another layer peeks out. In the inner sanctums, you find something else, something less controversial, but arguably weirder. It's called the Flower of Life, a geometric pattern made of interlocking circles etched into the stone with such mathematical precision that it sparked endless debates. Was it decorative? Symbolic? A secret code? Some say the pattern represents sacred geometry, a kind of visual map to the fundamental forces of existence. Energy, consciousness, time. All represented in overlapping loops. You can get lost in it if you stare too long. Others brush it off. It's just a design, they argue. A doodle with a compass. But here's the kicker. There's no evidence the Egyptians used compasses. Not metal ones. Not ones that would leave marks this perfect. Not like this. And so the whispers continue. You pass a sunlit courtyard, now empty but once full of priests and prayers. The air is thick with silence. It's the kind of silence that clings. The kind that holds stories just under the surface. You remember how Seti I, like many pharaohs, obsessed over his legacy. He built this place to ensure his name lived forever, etched in stone, sung in rituals. But even he couldn't have predicted that thousands of years later, people would be staring at a damaged panel behind his temple, wondering if he accidentally invented the helicopter. You laugh softly. Legacy is weird like that. You take a seat on a warm stone ledge. The sun is dipping low now, and the temple glows as if lit from within. You think about the hands that carved these walls, the calluses, the sweat, the certainty that what they made would last forever. And it has, sort of. But what remains isn't always what was intended. You look up at the sky, pale pinks fading into lavender. No flying machines, just birds. But even the birds seem a little smug, like they know something you don't. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the coolness of the stone soak into your spine, and you wonder not whether the ancients had flying machines, but whether they ever imagined we'd be the ones peering back, squinting at broken carvings, filling the gaps with dreams, because that's the real mystery, isn't it? Not just what they knew, but how badly we want to know it. The stars are beginning to show as you rise from the ledge, brushing sand from your hands. The temple behind you exhales ancient breath, and you feel it at your back like a whisper. But now you're heading south, following the Nile's curve past crumbling pillars and sleeping crocodiles toward a mystery not carved in stone but written in missing ink. Welcome to the mystery of the lost labyrinth of Egypt. It begins as many Egyptian puzzles do with the Greeks. Herodotus, our favorite gossiping historian from the 5th century BCE, described a structure so vast and intricate that it made the pyramids look like training wheels. He claimed to have seen it himself. 12 courts, endless halls, thousands of rooms above and below ground, walls etched with every story Egypt ever knew. You pause at the thought, imagining it buried somewhere under your feet, a maze of memories, a palace of riddles. Herodotus wasn't alone. Later writers, Strabo, Diodorus Siculus, even Pliny also wrote of it. Some said it was near the city of Crocodilopolis, which, yes, is real. Others put it near Lake Moeris. Still, no one can agree on where exactly it stood. Historians still argue whether the labyrinth ever existed, or if it was simply a metaphor for the Egyptian mind. Layered, winding, unknowable. But here's the twist. There is some physical evidence. In the 19th century, an archaeologist named Flinders Petrie excavated a site near Hawara, and he found something. Massive foundation slabs, carved stones, enough architectural leftovers to suggest something monumental once stood there, but nothing matching Herodotus's fever dream description. Maybe it was plundered. Maybe it sank, or maybe it was never as grand as he claimed and his sandals were just too tight that day. You imagine walking those lost halls, not the pristine museum vision, but real ones, dusty, echoing, half collapsed. Maybe the ceiling was painted like the night sky. Maybe the floor mosaics told the story of gods rising and dying with the flood. What was its purpose? A temple? A tomb? A records hall? Or in classic Egyptian style, all of the above? Some theories say it was built by Amenemhat III, one of the Middle Kingdom pharaohs who ruled around 1800 BCE. His reign was stable, prosperous, full of grand construction. He had the resources, the ambition, and maybe a flair for puzzles. Others suggest it was never built at all, that the real labyrinth was the underground tomb complex of kings and queens, mistaken by Greek travelers for a designed maze. The deeper you go, the blurrier the edges of truth become. Maybe the labyrinth was a concept, not a place, a metaphor for the path to the afterlife, full of choices, turns, and spiritual dead ends. Still, you can't help but feel something's there. Not just ruins, but an intention, a plan, a forgotten design buried beneath layers of mud and memory. You trudge on, the air getting cooler as the Nile breeze picks up. Around you, palm fronds rustle like parchment being turned. Nearby, another puzzle waits. Less architectural, more conceptual. It's the Dendera light. And oh boy, here we go again. At the Temple of Hathor in Dendera, deep in the crypt, there's a relief carving that shows something truly strange. A bulbous object held up by a figure. Inside it, a wavy snake-like form. Behind it, a cable-like shape connecting to something that resembles a generator. Or, if you're less romantically inclined, a lotus flower with a stylized serpent, a standard Egyptian motif. But to a modern eye, it really does look like a light bulb. Fringe theorists seized on this. "See!" they shout. "The ancients had electricity!" You nod because that would be convenient. It would explain how they lit the dark tombs while decorating them. No soot on the ceilings, no torch scorch marks. But then realism taps your shoulder. Ancient Egyptians were geniuses, yes. But glass bulbs, tungsten filaments, alternating current. Mainstream Egyptologists roll their eyes. Hard. They point to the mythology. The bulb isn't a bulb, they say. It's the womb of creation, the snake representing the god Atum slithering from the lotus at the dawn of time. The cord, that's symbolic. The platform, divine support, it's all allegory. Don't take it so literally, and yet you stare at the carving and your brain insists that's a light bulb. It's not the tech itself that's haunting, it's the idea. That maybe we're underestimating how differently they saw the world. That their symbols weren't codes for tools, but whole cosmologies. You let your fingers trace the grooves of the image. Cold stone, soft dust, hard questions. You think back to the labyrinth, the helicopter panel, the flower of life, all these artifacts whispering the same thing. We were here, and we were complicated. Because that's the uncomfortable truth. Ancient Egypt doesn't fit neatly in our boxes. We want it to be either mystical or practical, either spiritual or scientific. But the Egyptians lived in the middle, where dreams built cities and metaphors had plumbing. As you stand there, the crypt thick with silence, you think about how often we look back not to understand but to see ourselves. We want validation, reflection, echoes. Did they think like us? Did they build like us? Were they us? And maybe in some ways, yes. But in other ways, they were stranger, richer, deeper. They were willing to build meaning into stone and let it sit there for thousands of years, daring someone to guess right. You exhale and move toward the exit. Another mystery waits, and you're not quite ready to sleep. Not just yet. You emerge from the shadows of the temple, sand crunching underfoot like old parchment. The stars overhead blink slowly to life just as another mystery stretches before you. Long and dark like the Nile at midnight. You're heading now toward something even more peculiar. A relic not of stone but of thought. It's the ancient Egyptian concept of Heka magic, or more precisely, the energy that powered the universe. Now don't picture wands or wizard hats. This isn't Hogwarts. In Egypt, Heka wasn't just spellcasting, it was existence itself. The gods used it to create the world, humans used it to survive in it. Every prayer, every offering, every hieroglyph carved into a tomb wall, was a tap into this cosmic current. You pause beneath a crumbling statue of Thoth, the ibis-headed scribe god of wisdom. He probably had a hand in shaping Heka, a patron of sacred writing, of divine speech. If knowledge were a river, Thoth built the banks. The thing is, scholars still argue whether Heka was a literal force or a symbolic one. Was it meant to be something measurable like gravity, or more like faith, powerful but not testable? You think about that as you walk, because the more you look at Egyptian texts, the more you realize something weird. They blurred the line between word and reality. To name a thing was to give it power. To carve a god's image was to make it present. A statue wasn't a symbol, it was the god. A spell wasn't wishful thinking, it was machinery. One famous inscription from the coffin texts literally reads, "I am magic." Not "I use magic." Not "I believe in it." No, I am it. So you wonder, did they believe magic was in the bones of the world? Not tricks, not illusion, but actual structure. Maybe the world itself was a kind of spell, a sustained chant. The Nile as sentence, the sky as grammar, existence as poetry in present tense. It might explain why so many Egyptian tombs were basically libraries for the dead. Papyrus scrolls, carved texts, instructions for the soul to navigate the afterlife. These weren't just funeral decorations, these were survival manuals. And that's not all. Some spells had precise instructions. Say this, say it exactly like this. Like passwords, like code. One wrong word and the cosmic app crashes. Reboot your KA and try again. You smile at the idea, ancient Egypt, the original operating system. But Heka wasn't only for death. The living used it too. Healing spells, protection charms, even weather control if you believed the more colorful stories. Farmers chanting over their seeds. Mothers whispering names into amulets for safe childbirth. Scribes drawing divine diagrams to ward off plagues. And in the middle of it all, the magician priests, trained not only in religion but in medicine, astronomy, and mathematics. These weren't stage performers, they were scientists wrapped in linen and metaphor. Their spells often included ingredients, instructions, and rituals that would make a modern herbalist nod in respect. One surviving papyrus gives a recipe for banishing nightmares. The ingredients: honey, mandrake, and a figurine of the threatening spirit to be burned at midnight. A little creepy. Yes, but also kind of logical. Address the fear, sweeten the mind, symbolically destroy the threat. It's CBT with more incense. And yet among all these records, there are missing pieces, texts too damaged, lines too cryptic, glyphs that might mean 10 different things depending on the moon phase or the priest's mood that day. Historians still debate whether this magical worldview was universal or just priestly propaganda. Were common people truly steeped in this system? Or was it a luxury of the elite who could afford tomb inscriptions and temple ceremonies? You remember one funerary spell that ends with, "Say this and you shall not die a second death." That's powerful. That's terrifying. Because in Egypt, dying once wasn't the worst part. It was dying again, being forgotten, being erased. So maybe Heka was memory too, language carved into permanence. a last defense against the tide of silence. You crouch beside a broken column, brush away sand, and find a tiny fragment of inscription. Just a few glyphs, but they shimmer slightly in the moonlight like the stone still remembers its meaning. You can't read it, of course, but you whisper something anyway. A word, a name, a wish. Not because you expect anything, but because what if? And that's the essence of Heika. Not blind belief, but structured possibility. A system for asking the universe to listen, even if it never replies. You stand and continue, the wind tugging gently at your sleeves. In the distance, another shape looms in the sand. Not a temple this time, but a figure. Motionless, monumental. The Sphinx. You smile. You're almost there, but before you reach it, you think once more about the idea that the Egyptians weren't trying to deceive us with their mysteries. They weren't hiding something. They were showing us, again and again, that the world is stranger than it looks. That what's buried isn't always gone. That meaning can be both magic and muscle. And that maybe, just maybe, the universe really does respond when you speak to it with enough care. Even if all it does is whisper back through stone, the Sphinx waits for you. You walk slowly now, as the ground levels into a mix of stone and sand, firm beneath your feet. The desert air settles like a hush, and there it is, half lion, half human, full mystery. Its limestone face turned forever eastward toward the rising sun, as if it's guarding a secret the world no longer knows how to ask. You stop a few steps away and look up. The nose is famously missing, but the eyes, still there, still watching, still calm, and not saying a word. It's one of the largest, oldest monolithic statues on Earth. And yet we don't even know what the ancient Egyptians called it. That's right. Its original name is lost. Sphinx is a Greek label, centuries late to the party, so even the name we use is a placeholder. You glance up again. It's not just a statue, it's a question mark in stone. Historians still argue whether the Sphinx was built during the reign of Khafra, as most textbooks say, or whether it predates him by centuries. Some geologists point to weathering patterns on its base, deep, rounded grooves that seem more like water erosion than mere desert wind. That suggests it may have stood through a wetter, older period, which throws the timeline into chaos. Is the Sphinx older than the pyramids? Older than the dynasties themselves? Maybe, maybe not. Depends on who you ask, and how many conspiracies you're willing to entertain before bedtime. There's even debate over its face. Is that really Khafra's likeness? The proportions seem off. The head is smaller than expected compared to the massive body, as if it was recarved at some point. Imagine taking a divine lion and shrinking its ego to fit a human crown. Some theories go further, arguing that the Sphinx's original head might have been a lion's, or perhaps even something stranger, a jackal to match Anubis, or an astronomical symbol aligning with constellations. You don't know. No one really does. And that's the thing. The Sphinx stands as the perfect symbol of ancient Egypt's mysteries. Not because it hides the truth, but because it is the truth. Silent, massive, carved into permanence, and yet impossible to fully grasp. You walk slowly around its paw. They're enormous, like boulders stacked on purpose. Near the chest is a slab known as the Dream Stele, placed there by Pharaoh Thutmose IV. According to the inscription, he fell asleep in the Sphinx's shadow and dreamt the statue spoke to him, promising kingship if he cleared away the sand covering its body. He did, apparently. And he got the crown. Whether that's politics or prophecy, well, again, you've entered the realm of dreams. And this is a recurring theme in Egyptian myth: sleep, dreams, and the divine. The belief that gods communicate through the space between waking and not waking. Temples were built with dream chambers. Priests studied omens. If you saw a hawk fly east in your sleep, it meant one thing. If it flew west, another. If it pooped on you, well, maybe take a sick day. Egypt wasn't just a civilization of stone. It was one of spirit, of subconscious pathways, of ritual and metaphor laid out like an invisible map. You glance back at the Sphinx one last time before continuing, a little unnerved by the way it seems to follow you. Not with its eyes, but with its silence. That confident stillness. Like someone who knows the ending of a story you haven't finished reading. As you descend a path away from the plateau, you catch sight of something odd. A shaft in the ground, partially collapsed, partially hidden. Egypt is full of these forgotten tunnels, sunken chambers, staircases that end in dirt. Rumors cling to them like dust. Secret archives, lost libraries, vaults of ancient knowledge sealed away because humanity isn't ready. You've heard the stories. Beneath the Sphinx lies a hidden chamber, the Hall of Records, a mythical room said to contain the lost wisdom of Atlantis, or the original scrolls of Thoth, or maybe just a really fancy ancient broom closet. There's no proof, of course. But people keep looking. Why? Because the idea of hidden knowledge never dies. The sense that something more is waiting just under the surface. And in Egypt, that idea isn't foolish. It's cultural, layered, encouraged. Tombs under tombs, rooms behind walls. Puzzles encoded into paintings as if the past itself is a cryptic language waiting for someone to get the grammar right. You pause to rest beneath a date palm, sipping water from a cracked canteen you found earlier. A breeze passes, hot and dry, but not unfriendly, and for a moment you feel like part of something. Less a tourist and more a note in the song Egypt keeps humming to itself. Even the animals here carry echoes of mystery. Cats, for instance, sacred to Bastet, goddess of protection and joy. They were pampered, mummified, worshipped, but also feared. Because cats aren't just cute. They stare into corners. They seem to know things. And in a culture obsessed with the afterlife, that sort of vibe gets you divine status fast. You smile remembering that one tale where an angry mob destroyed a Roman soldier for accidentally killing a cat. Not a priest, not a noble, a cat. That's Egypt for you. There's a sacredness here that transcends our categories. What we call myth, they call daily reality. What we dismiss as superstition, they treated as science with different symbols. As twilight deepens, you walk further along the Nile's edge, and it occurs to you, this place isn't just about the past. It's about how people once imagined the future. They built pyramids to last forever. They etched spells to guide souls through eternity. Their architecture wasn't made to impress kings. It was made to outlast them, and somehow it has. Even now, in your modern clothes with your modern thoughts, you feel small beneath their shadows. But not insignificant, because you're part of the same puzzle, the same questions, the same stargazing, sand-digging, story-chasing curiosity. You're almost at the end of your walk now. The stars begin to spill across the sky like ink in water. The Sphinx behind you fades into silhouette. The river glints with moonlight, and still no final answers, just more echoes, more dust, more awe. But you wouldn't have it any other way. You pause near the riverbank, dust clinging to your sweat-damp sleeves, your boots a patchwork of sand, cracked leather, and that mystery stain you picked up back in Section 9. The stars above the Nile are out in full. Soft glimmers stretched across black velvet. Somewhere upstream, frogs are singing, or possibly complaining. Hard to tell with frogs. You ease down onto a flat stone, rake still in hand, and gaze at the water. The Nile. It feels more like a character than a river. The kind of character who's older than everyone and doesn't say much but watches everything. This river made Egypt. Without it, there's no grain, no cities, no mummies, no legends. Every June it flooded, like clockwork before clocks. The floodwaters brought silt, and the silt brought life. The ancient Egyptians knew this, honored it, worshipped it, called it happy. A god of abundance with breasts and a big smile and a belly that suggested second helpings were sacred. And yet, for all the predictability of the Nile, it still had its secrets. Historians still argue whether the river's source was truly understood by the ancients. Some inscriptions suggest they knew it came from the south, but they didn't map it the way we do now. To them, the Nile wasn't something to conquer. It was something to harmonize with. An old friend you didn't question too hard. As you sit, you notice a pattern in the mud, a spiral. Just a broken snail shell maybe, but it feels symbolic. Egypt has a way of doing that, making you think in metaphors. You wonder if this was part of the point. Not just the grandeur of temples and the gold in tombs, but the daily poetry of it all. The way sunlight hits a stone, the way one broken pot can tell 1,000 stories. And maybe that's the final mystery. Because for all the debates about pyramids and curses, lost maps and secret chambers, what endures most about ancient Egypt isn't what they left behind. It's how they make you feel, not just curious, but connected. Like you're in on something. Like deep down, you've always known this place, even if you've never been. That's the strange warmth of it. You don't study Egypt, you remember it. You lean back, a breeze ruffles your hair. The reeds sway. Somewhere in the dark, a waterbird lets out a sound like an annoyed librarian. You remember something a guide once told you. Half joking, half true, in Egypt, the dead are more organized than the living. It's not wrong. The Book of the Dead has indexes, the pyramids have precision, the tombs have labels. Meanwhile, the living just keep stumbling forward, coffee in hand, pretending to know where we're going. But maybe that's the comfort. The ancients didn't have it all figured out either. They just made better art while guessing. You shift your weight and notice your shirt is now fully soaked. Sweat, Nile mist, philosophical confusion. It all blends. Your back cracks again. Fewer vertebrae to go. You sigh and whisper, not to anyone in particular, "Good night, Egypt."